Welcome to the SQLAlchemy crash course. In this course, I'll teach you how to use SQLAlchemy and SQLite DB to create your first backend system for a to-do list. This is not a full course, but this course will get you through with the basics. At the end of this course, you learn how to create, get, update, and also delete records with SQLAlchemy and SQLite DB. Without further ado, let's hop on to the course. Let's start by creating our project folder. So I'll right click, new, then folder. Then I'll rename the folder so we can call this to-do list. So we are going to create a simple to-do list backend system with SQLAlchemy. So I'll double click to open it. So let me just expand this. Once I open, I'll send my cursor on top. Then I'll type cmd, then enter. Once you type cmd, enter, then command prompt will be opened to that directory. So now, the first thing you probably have to do is to create a virtual environment to isolate your packages from the main packages. But before we create a virtual environment, make sure you have virtual environment installed. So you can use pip install, then virtual env, then you press enter to install it. But I already have virtual environment installed on my PC, so I don't need to install it again. But if you don't have it, just enter this command and press enter to install virtual env. So since I have it, I'll clear everything. So now let's create a virtual environment. To create a virtual environment, you use the virtual env, then you give space, then the name of your virtual environment. So I can choose to call it venv, then I'll press enter. So let me zoom it. So I'll press enter. So once you have the virtual environment created, then next is to activate your virtual environment. But you can also minimize this and check to see if you have this folder inside your main directory. Then you can open back your cmd, then we can activate the virtual environment. So to activate the virtual environment, you put period, then you use the backslash, then the name of your virtual environment. So the name of my virtual environment is venv, then I'll use backslash again, then I'll use scripts, then backslash, then activate. So now if I press enter, it will activate the virtual environment. If you check over here, you'll see venv, which means my virtual environment is activated successfully. So now we can start installing our SQLAlchemy package. So just use pip install, then SQLAlchemy. So press enter to install the SQLAlchemy package. So now I have my SQLAlchemy package installed successfully. So we can use code, then space, then period to open this in VS Code. So this will open our directory in VS Code. So once I have my directory open, I'll click on yes, I trust or test. So now we can zoom it. So let me zoom it a little bit. So now let me zoom out and let's install these extensions first. You send your cursor to the extension tab, then you can search for the Python extension and install the Python extension. So this is the Python extension. So make sure you have it installed. So once you install it, you can search for the Code Runner extension, and then make sure you have the Code Runner extension installed. So now I'll click on my Explorer tab over here to open the Explorer. So let me zoom everything. So now let's connect to the database we want to use. So now I'll click over here to create a new file, then I'll call it connection.py. So now I'll press enter to open it. So let me collapse everything and increase it. So now before we connect to the database, we need to import a couple of functions. So the first function we need is the create engine. So I'll use from SQLAlchemy import, then we want the create engine, create underscore engine. So next we need the session maker. So I'll use from SQLAlchemy .orm import session maker. So these are the two functions we need for now. But before we connect to the database, we need to have a connection string or URI. So I'll create a connection URI over here, then it should be a string. Then I'll set it equals to, then we'll try connecting to the database. So by default, SQLAlchemy comes with an SQLite database. So I'll try to connect with the SQLite database. So SQLite, then you put column, then you put double forward slashes over here, then you write the name of the database. So I can just call it to do underscore app, then you put period, then you add .db. So .db means database file. So I have my connection URI over here, and then I can come down and then connect to this database. So but before I connect, I'll have an engine over here, then I'll set it equals to the create engine. So now I'll open the create engine, then I'll pass my URI over here. So now I can come down, and then we'll have our session maker. So I'll have my session, then I'll set it equals to, then session maker, then I'll open, and inside here I'll have bind. So I'll have bind, then I'll set it equals to the engine. So now I'll come over here, then I'll initialize the session. So I'll use the db underscore session. So I'm creating a variable and I'm choosing to call it db underscore session. There I'll set it equals to session. So sorry, session. Then I'll invoke it. So now I can try to test. So try to test my connection. To test the connection, I can have a try and an exception over here. So I can have my exception. So except exception as E. So as E. So now in case there's an error, I can simply print the error out for the user. So now inside my try, I'll try to connect. So I'll have connection and I'll set it equals to engine.connect. So engine.connect to connect to the database. So now I'll have connection. So I'll have my connection dot close my connection. So dot close. So once I close the connection, I can simply print connected successfully. So I'll have something like ping, then I'll have connected successfully. So now if you have your code runner extension installed, you see this icon over here, and in case you don't see the icon, you can simply right click and click on run code. So if you scroll over here, we'll have a problem. So I think the problem is from our connection string. So let's close and then go up, and here is supposed to be triple forward slashes. So now right click and run code. Once you run code, then you have this connected successfully over here. So now if you close and click on the Explorer tab, you find your to-do app database over here. So we have successfully created a database and we have connected to the database. So now let's try to create our models we are going to use to push the data. If you really enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and also smash on that subscription button for more content like this. Let's proceed. So to create the model, I'll simply have a model folder over here. So I'll simply call it, so let's just create a model file rather. So I'll click over here, then I'll have a model, so model.py. So now I'll press enter to have my model.py. And inside my model, I need to import the declarative base. So I'm going to use from SQLAlchemy.orm import, then we'll have declarative base. So now I'll come over here, then I'll have the base, so I'll have it capitals, so right capital base, then I'll set it equals to, then declarative base over here, then I'll initialize it. So but before you connect your models to your database, you have to come to this connection and then you have to import this base over here. So go to the connection, then use from models, so from model import, then I want the base. I can come down over here after the session, then I can bind the database. So bind the database. So to bind the database, I'm going to use base. So I'll write base dot metadata. So metadata dot create underscore all, then I'll open. And inside here I'll have bind, then I'll set it equals to, then I'll have engine. So this will bind my tables to the database. So now I can go to my models over here, then I can start creating my tables. So I'll have the table for the to do. When I spell to do, so to do. To create my table, I need to import some couple of functions first. So I'm going to use from SQLAlchemy import. Then I need the column so that I can create my table fields. So next I need the integer, and then I need the string data type, and then I need the boolean data type. So these are the data types I need for now. And I'm going to use the column to create each field. So now you're going to have a class for our to-do. So you can have a class for users of your website, but here we are only doing for to-do lists. So I'll have a class for my to-dos, then I'll pass the base over here. So now let me bring it down so that I'll have space. So after this, put column, then you can come down, then you can have underscore underscore, then you have your table name. So make sure to have two underscores over here, then put another underscore and put another underscore, then the type should be a string, then set it equals to then the name of your table. So I can call it to do table. So let me just call it to do and leave it. So now we can have our fields. So I can have an ID. So every record should always have an ID. So I'll have ID, then I'll set it equals to, then I'll use column to create the ID section of my to-do list. So open over here, then the ID should be an integer. Then this should be our primary key. So I'll set primary key, then I'll set it equals to true. Then I'll put comma again, then I'll make this auto increment. So auto increment, then I'll set it equals to true. So auto increment means that the ID is going to be automatically generated by the system. So now after this, I can have the title of my to-do. So I can have the title, then I'll set it equals to, then I'll have column, then the title should be a string. So after the title, then we'll have done over here, and the done should be a boolean. So we'll have boolean, so boolean. So boolean, so it means if it is done, it should be true, else it should be false. So we can have the default over here, and then the default will be false. So by default, it should be false. So we have the title, then we have the done over here. So next we have the class constructor for our to-do class. So I'll have def underscore underscore, then I'll have init underscore underscore again, then I'll open over here. So inside here we'll have self, then I'll give space. So I'll have self, then I'll give space, and then we'll have the title and the done. So we are not going to pass the ID because it's going to be automatically generated, but we'll have the title, then we'll have the done over here. So we'll have done. So sorry, done. Oh my god, done. So after this, put a column over here, then we can come down, then we'll have self. So sorry, self dot title, then you set it equals to your title. Then we'll have self dot done, then we'll set it equals to done. So now I think our table is created successfully. So we can go ahead and try to create a new data inside the database. So click over here, then we'll create a new file. So we can call this CRUD. So CRUD So can I spell CRUD? CRUD.py. And inside here, we are going to perform all our CRUD operations. So I'll press enter to create the file. So once I create the file, I need to import my DB connection. So if I go to my connection, I'll have the DB session over here. So I need to import it inside here. So from, then the name of the file is connection, import, then we'll have DB session. So after this, I need to import the to-do class over here. So I'm going to use from, then model, import. So import the to-do class. So I have my connection and I have my to-do class over here. So now we'll try to create, then we'll try to get, then we'll try to update. After updating, then we'll try to delete a to-do. So first, let's try to create a to-do over here. So I have a function, and inside my function, I'll call it create underscore to-do. So let me change this to underscore to-do. So if I open my function, then the user can pass the title over here. So the user can pass the title of the to-do over here. Then the user can also pass, so the title should be a string. So after that, the user can also pass the done, whether it's done or not. So you can pass the done and it should be a boolean. Now I'll put my column, then I can come down over here, then I can have my title equals to title, then I can have my done equals to, then I'll have done. So now we can have a request over here. So I can have a request, then I'll set it equals to, then I'll have my to-do class, then I'll open the class, then I'll pass the title, then the done over here. So I'll have my title, then I'll have done. So sorry, done. So after this, then I can try to push it to the database. So I can use DB session. So sorry, I can use DB session dot, then I can use the add to add it to the database. So I'll open, then I'll pass the request over here. So once I pass the request, I can simply print. So I can simply, so I can simply print, then I can have data added successfully. So data added successfully. I say successfully. So now we can try to see. So sorry, after adding, you need to commit your changes. So I'll use db session dot commit to commit my changes. So now let's try the function. So I'll copy my function, create to do, then I'll come to the bottom, then I can paste it over here. So I'll call the function and I'll pass the title and then the done over here. So the title is a string, so I can have my first to do, which is creating a Python course. So now I'll have my done, whether it's done or not. So I'll set it equals to false because it's not yet done. So now I'll simply run it. So once I run, I'll have data added successfully over here. So I'll add another to do. So maybe I'll have blogging. So blogging, then I'll run my code, then I'll have data added successfully. So after blogging, let's add another data, which is web dev. Then I'll click over here, then I'll have added successfully. So now we have added data to our database. So next, we're trying to get the data from our database. So how do we access the data from the database? So everything will be saved on this to do underscore app db file over here. So now I'll close and I'll go to my CRUD over here, then we'll try to access our data. So first, let's try to get all data. So I'll try to get all data. So now if I come over here, I can have my function. So I'll call it all. So let me call it all underscore to do's. So sorry, change this to underscore to do's. So now I'll open over here, then I'll come to have the function. So here I'll simply have a response, then I'll try to query the database. So I'll use db session, then I'll use .query to query the database. and then I'll open, then I'll pass the table over here. So the table is simple my to-do table. So after I've query, I'll simply use the .all to return all the response. So now I can simply print my response over here, then we'll try it out. So I'll copy the all to-dos, then I'll simply call the function, then I'll run it. So once I run, I'll have this over here. So this is my first to do, and we'll have comma, this is the second one, and this is the third one. But before we can see the data, we have to serialize the data first. So we have to serialize the data before we can then access the data. So I'll come over here, then I'll create a new file, then I'll call it decoders, or let me just call it decode, then .py. So we'll try to decode the data. So inside my decode, I'll have my first decode, which will decode a single document. So I'll call it decode underscore to do, then I'll open, then I'll have my doc over here. So this will simply return a Python dictionary, and here I'll return the dictionary. So the first is the ID of the data. So to get the ID, I'll simply use doc._id. So let me check, is it underscore? So it's _ID. So next is the title. So next is the title of my to-do. So title. So to get the title, I'll use doc.title. So next is the done. So done. So I'll use doc.done to get it. So now I have my first serializer. So this will serialize a single to-do item. So what if we want to serialize a list of all our to-dos? So that's where we'll have to loop the whole function over here. So I'll have def, I'll have decode, then I'll have to-dos. So put underscore. So this is to do, and this have s, which makes it to-dos. So here I'll put docs instead of doc, and here I'll simply return a Python list. So now I can come and return my list, and I'll open the list. So I'll try to loop through my function, and the function is the first function, which is the decode over here. So I'll loop through it. So I'll use for doc in docs. So this will simply loop through. So simply for doc in docs. So this will simply loop through this function over here. So we are going to use this to loop through all, and then we'll decode everything. I'll come to my CRUD, then I'll go up, then I can use from decoders. So from decoders, import. So simply just import decoders. So import decode. So I'm importing the whole file over here. So now I can come over here, then I'll decode everything. So I can have docs, then I'll set it equals to, then I'll have decode dot, then I'll use the decode to-dos because I'm trying to decode a list of all the to-dos. Now I can pass them, so I'll pass the rest to have everything. So now I'll simply print the docs. So now if we cross our fingers and run our code and come, we'll have all of them over here. So we'll have the first one, which is creating a Python course, then we'll have the second, blogging, then we'll have the third, web dev over here. So now everything has worked perfectly. So next we'll try to get a single to do. So what if we want the first to do? For example, we want the to do with the ID number 1, or we want only number 2. So to access this, so I'll have get 1, and I can come to have my function, which is which is I can simply call it to do. Then I'll open, then the user is supposed to pass the ID. You are supposed to pass the ID of the to do you want. The ID should be an integer. And here I'll simply come to have the function. So I'll have my response just like we did before. Then I'll use db session.query to query the database. So .query, then I'll open and I'll have my to do. So after I query, then I'll have a filter over here. So first we have to create our criteria. So criteria, criteria, then I set it equals to, then I'll open to have my criteria. So the criteria is simple what we are going to use to filter for the data we want. So we want the one with the ID which is equals to the ID the user have passed over here. So now I can use the filter by to filter by that criteria. So I'll open, then I'll put double asterisk. We put double asterisk, then you pass your criteria. So now I'll use the one or none, so one or none, to return either one document or none. So it means if the data exists, return only one of the document. But if the data do not exist, then return none. So now I can come down over here, then we'll check to see if the data exists. So I'll check if res is not none. So if res is not none, it means the data exists. And if the data exists, then we'll have the doc, then I'll set it equals to, then I'll serialize the data. So decode dot decode underscore to do. So here we are returning a single document. That's why we are using the to do instead of the decode to do's. So I'll open, then I'll pass my res. So now I can come down, then I can simply print the doc over here. But in case the document do not exist, then we'll have our else statement over here, and I'll simple print document do not exist. So let's put F over here, and then I'll try to pass the ID. So I'll write something like record. So record with ID, then I'll pass my ID do not exist. I spell exist over here. So now let's try it. So I'll copy the function, and then I'll come, then I'll remove this, then I'll call my function, then I'll pass the ID number 1. So now run, then we'll get the number 1 over here. And if I put number 2, then I'll run again, then we'll have number 2 over here. But if I try number 6, or let me try, okay, number 6, then I run, then we'll have record with ID 6 do not exist. So now everything is working perfectly, and we can try to update the record. So to update the record, I'll simply copy this function over here to get one record, then I'll bring it down and put it over here. So we can simply update the title, or we can update the done. So if the user is done with the to do, we can update it and set it equals to true. So what do I mean? So we'll have the ID pass, then we'll have a document which will be a dictionary over here. So let me just make it data instead of document. So now we'll filter by the ID first, and once we get the ID, we are not going to print the record. So once we have the record, we can try to update it. So we can check if, then we'll check if title. So if title in, then we'll have the data. So this is the data. So we are going to pass the data. So if title exists in the data dictionary, then simply try to update the title. So I'm going to use res.title, then I'll set it equals to, then I'll use my data, then I'll access the title over here. So now I can check again if, then I'll check to see if done exists. So if done in, then data, then I'll simply use res.done, then I'll set it equals to, then I'll have data square brackets, then I'll have done. So this will check if we are passing title inside the dictionary, we'll update title, and if we are passing done to, we'll update the done. So once we update everything, we can use db session dot commit to commit everything. So once you update the document, we can simply get that document to see if it has updated successfully. So I'll call the function over here to have it. So first of all, change this to update underscore to do. So update underscore to do. So now go up, and then we'll call the to do function to get one to do over here. So after we have committed the changes, we'll call the function, then we are going to pass the ID we are updating. So I'll pass my ID. So now let's try to update. So update to do, then I'll open. So first we'll have the ID, then we'll have the data. So I'll have ID number 1, then I'll have the data, which will be a Python dictionary. So I can update only the title. So let me update only the title, then I'll change it to maybe SQLAlchemy. So can I spell SQLAlchemy, then course. So now if I run my code, then we'll come, we have updated it over here. So we have successfully updated it, and then we have changed the title to SQLAlchemy course. So now if I change, so for example, I can change the done. So I can also have done. So done, then I can set it equals to true, which means I am done with that to do item. So if I run and then I come, we'll see that the done over here have been changed to true. So if we go up, all that we are doing is that we are updating after we finish committing everything. We are calling our function over here, the to-do function, which will simply grab the ID and then print the document. So next, let's try to delete a document. So to delete a document, I'll copy my to-do function, then I'll come over here and I'll paste it. So now I'll have delete to do. So I'll have delete underscore to do. So we are going to pass the ID over here, and if the rest is not none, then we'll delete it. So to delete it, I'll use db_session.delete to delete a record. So now I'll open, then I'll pass my rest. So I can use db_session, then I can use .commit. So .commit to commit the changes. So commit. So now I can simply print data deleted successfully. So I'll have data deleted successfully. So now I can grab the delete to do, then I can simply bring it and then I'll paste it, and let's delete to do number 3, and then I'll run my code. So once I do, I'll have data deleted successfully. So to check to see if the data is deleted, let's try to grab the number 3. So I'll pass number 3 over here, and I'll run my code. Then we'll have record with ID number 3 do not exist, and if we pass number 2, then we run, then we'll have number 2 over here. So let me run again. So let me run, then we'll have number 2 over here. So this is SQLAlchemy in a nutshell for you. So I have another course which will teach you how to use SQLAlchemy with Fast API. So I'll leave a link to the course in the description. And if you want more of this course, and if you want to take your web development to the next level, be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you won't miss future updates.